What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, December 19th, 2016. The Electoral College is meeting. So far, no surprises. In fact, the only faithless electors to surface so far are people who refuse to vote for Hillary Clinton. So it's all come down to Texas. Donald Trump is just 11 electoral votes away from securing the 270, which would lock in his presidency. Texas, unfortunately, is caught in some procedural turmoil. Apparently, 2 of their electors were disqualified at the last minute, and apparently 4 simply didn't show up. Nobody knows what happened to them, so now they're going through the process of nominating and approving alternate electors, and from there they will proceed to the vote. But it is expected that they will deliver Texas 38 electoral votes to Donald Trump, and we're just waiting for that. Obviously, if something were to happen and the Texas electoral vote was somehow declared disqualified by Hillary and the corporate media, then the House of Representatives take over. But the last time I looked at the live video feed coming from the Texas legislature, they're just going through the motions, but it doesn't look like there's going to be any surprises here. All right, there's a lot of other stuff going on in the world. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Big news is over in Ankara at an art gallery during an exhibition of art photos. The Russian ambassador to Turkey was shot in a gun attack, and the assassin shot him down and then just went on a rant, Allah Akbar, or Aloha Snack Bar, or, ISIS is good, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And it came on out that this gentleman had all the necessary credentials to walk into what was a secure location, because it's turned out, despite early reports that he was from ISIS and everything, it turns out the assassin is a member of Turkey's Special Forces Police. And so this is already feeling like some kind of a false flag to start a war between Russia and Turkey, and it's already falling flat. Jerusalem Post is claiming that the assassin had links to Fethullah Gulen, the cleric who's now has asylum in the United States and has been a sore point of contention between Turkey and the U.S. And, of course, this assassination happened just prior to when Russia, Turkey, and Iran were going to have negotiations about settling things down in Syria, to which the United States government pointedly was not invited. Now, a top ally of Putin, Senator Franz Klintsevich, who's deputy chairman of the Russian Upper Chamber's Defense and Security Committee, says this was obviously a planned action organized by the secret services of a NATO member nation. And they're saying it's an act of terror, obviously, and it will have absolutely no effect on the three-way negotiations between Turkey, Russia, and Syria. They're going to move on ahead. So if that was the motive behind this false flag assassination attempt, it's failed utterly. But we all need to be paying attention to what's going on here, because we're basically in Archduke Ferdinand territory right now. And clearly, with Donald Trump on his way to being validated once more as the new president, the war hawks are trying to find some way they can get a war going, which leads us to this terrible incident that just happened up at a Christmas market in Berlin. Now, Germany is famous for having these open-air markets at Christmas time. I got to experience them in Munich back in the 1980s. And up in Berlin, a truck ran in to the Christmas market in Berlin, crushing a bunch of booths. 50 people hurt, 9 reported dead. The police are saying, yes, this was, in fact, a terror attack. And we don't know who they're going to blame it on. But remember, German authorities are under orders from Angela Merkel not to mention any Islamic terrorists or refugees or Muslims, if that's, in fact, who did it. So what are they going to do? It was a terror attack. We can't tell you who did it. Now, getting on to the Electoral College vote, as I mentioned before, there are no surprises. The only faithless electors have turned out to be against Hillary, And apparently there was in Minnesota refused to vote for Hillary Clinton, wanted to vote for Bernie Sanders instead. Apparently up in Washington State, 4 out of their 12 electors refused to vote for Hillary, even though Hillary took that state. Now, over in Wisconsin, a lot of these electoral meetings are being live streamed because of the concern and attention focused on them. And when the Wisconsin electors certified for Donald Trump, apparently there were a lot of Hillary supporters and liberal losers that had gotten into the galleries there, and they started screaming and crying, and it's amazing here. And there was a huge protest outside the Texas state capitol aimed at their electors. And what was amazing, Joe Biggs tweeted out that all these protesters were shouting, USA, 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 USA. Not one of them actually had an American flag. It's just a talking point that they're shouting, because they still will not accept that they were unable to steal this election for Hillary Rotten Clinton. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We're talking about the turmoil in the Electoral College. So far, it's all going the way historically, traditionally it would. The faithless electors all seem to be coming out against Hillary. Texas is expected to put Donald Trump over the top of 270 electoral votes, but they're bogged down in procedural problems because 2 of the electors were disqualified, and 4 simply didn't show up, and nobody knows why they didn't show up, but they didn't. So they're going through the process of nominating and voting alternate electors, and apparently the Texas GOP was prepared for this because they have a bunch of alternates already there, seated in the state capitol, present in the room, so they can move forward and not get this thing jammed up. Up in Pennsylvania, the police provided protection to their electors. One of the Pennsylvania electors, Ash Kare, told the Gazette he receives thousands of emails a day trying to swing his vote to Hillary Clinton. And, of course, we've heard about all these electors getting death threats. If you don't vote for Hillary, we will come in and kill your goldfish. And here's the problem. Section 11B of the Voting Rights Act, okay, 52 U.S. Code Section 10307 makes it a crime to threaten any person for voting or attempting to vote. Now, these electors are in the process of voting for the president, as empowered by their state voters. And why isn't Loretta Lynch and the Department of Justice going after these people threatening the Trump electors? It's a crime. It is a federal crime for them to be doing that, and of course we know what the answer is going to be. These are liberalologists. They're above the laws of mere men, and certainly above the laws of you Trump deplorables. We're liberals. We know what's best for the world, and we will continue. Now, the Democrats are already talking about trying to find a way to impeach Donald Trump as soon as he's sworn into office. Now, this will not put Hillary Clinton into the Oval Office. As soon as Texas completes its electoral vote, Hillary's path to the White House is over. If anything happens to Donald Trump now, Mike Pence will become the president. But the Democrats are out there proving once again they're a bunch of spoiled brat children, and they're out there still screaming Russia stole the election and it's all the fault of the independent media. And apparently Elizabeth Warren has announced that she and fellow senators are going to introduce legislation to impeach Trump immediately on his taking office. And their entire grounds are that Trump's wealth has come from his business activity, as opposed to career politicians who become wealthy from bribes and donations and the rest of it. But they're basically saying it's impossible for him not to have a conflict of interest, and therefore we can impeach him on those grounds. But, of course, the Clinton Foundation, that was okay. We didn't need to impeach anybody over the Clinton Foundation because, after all, those are Democrats and liberals, and they are above the laws of men. Now, have you noticed how the corporate media and even the government itself has done a 180-degree about-face? Remember back during the debates when Trump came on out and said there are reasons to question the honesty and integrity of the American elections system, and they all say, oh, that's ridiculous. It's impossible for the election system to be rigged, and stop whining about the rigged elections and stuff. Then Donald Trump won, and all of a sudden they do an about-face and say, well, Russia hacked the elections. The independent media poison. It's all James Comey's fault. It's all this fault and that fault. And no, it isn't. First of all, the evidence for Russian hacking is extremely weak to the point of non-existence. And it's become a catch-all for losers all around the world. They're claiming now the Brexit vote was hacked by Russia. Germany is claiming that Russia hacked secret German communications and provided them to WikiLeaks. They both have now backed off and said, no, it was internal leaks. Same thing here. Russia hacked the DNC emails. No, that was an internal leak. Remember when the NSA hacking tools were revealed? The media said, oh, it's the Russian hackers. They're stealing all this. And then it turned out it was another leak by an insider who got arrested for it. So they've cried Russian wolf way too many times for anybody to be listening to them. Now, over at Reality Check, Ben Swan, he's listed out 5 specific reasons why this Russian hacking story simply does not work. First and foremost, because Julian Assange says it was an internal leak. The former UK ambassador, who apparently was part of the conduit, says it's an internal leak. There is no proof whatsoever. When the emails were first leaked, the DNC said there's absolutely no evidence our servers are under attack. Now, of course, Donna Brazil is saying exactly the opposite. Russia's hacking our servers every single day. Oh, absolutely. They didn't stop when Obama said they stopped. But you have to go back and look at how the House Intelligence Committee asked the CIA to come on in and share with them the evidence they had Russia was hacking the DNC emails or the elections, and the CIA refused. The CIA just refused. That's tantamount to saying we don't have any evidence whatsoever. Now, a story that's a YouTube video, we've got it up on the front of whatreallyhappened.com, a former House Intelligence Committee chairman has come on out saying rogue CIA agents are pushing this Russian hacking narrative, and he says the way they work is very simple. There's about 14, 15 of them, and they're calling up their contacts in the media and saying, oh, yes, we absolutely have evidence Russia hacked it, and the media quotes them without any independent verification. It's like how they rounded up all the people that claimed that humans were warming the planet and snow was a thing of the past. Kellyanne Conway, responding to the kerfuffle over at the House Intelligence Committee, is saying the CIA seems intent on leaking damaging information to the media rather than actually coming forward and testifying as to what, if any, evidence they have of the Russian hacking. So it is completely out of control. Now, William Binney, who was an NSA whistleblower long before Edward Snowden, has come on out and said, if Russia was trying to hack anything in the United States, the NSA would know it because all the fiber communications are compromised, which we already knew. He says the fact that these DNC emails came on out and took everybody by surprise shows they were transmitted by flash drive, not by the Internet, and that, too, supports that it was an internal leak rather than Russian hacking. Now, of course, a lot of people are looking at Seth Rich as possibly having been the leaker. He was certainly in a position to have access to the information. He was very discouraged and disappointed with the DNC's rigging of the primaries to steal the nomination from Bernie Sanders. And a lot of people were looking at the strange way he died, where he was shot and killed near his home. The official story is he died during a robbery, except that he still had his wallet, his watch, and his cell phone. So he wasn't actually robbed. He was simply gunned down in the streets. It also turns out now Seth Rich was scheduled to testify to the Clinton investigation regarding that email server. So he was a witness there. We had about 5 people, all died strangely. They were all going to be witnesses in the investigations into the Clinton corruption here. Now, over in Wisconsin, the recount there found the same evidence for fraud that was found in Michigan, that there are issues with the machine count votes. And they swept it under the rug at the time, but now pressure is being brought to bear saying this has to be done. This has to be taken care of right now. And with all this talk about Russia hacking, have you noticed there isn't a word about anybody going back and verifying whether the presidential election was honest or not? Because they know what they'll find. They'll find in every state what was already documented in Michigan, massive election fraud favoring Hillary Clinton. So what's going on right now is the CIA is playing their regime change game again. They've been doing it in all sorts of foreign countries since the end of World War II. And now they're trying to do it here, trying to find some way to prevent Donald Trump from going into that White House and putting in somebody of their choosing, maybe Hillary, maybe somebody else, and they're risking a civil war by doing it because every American knows that's what they're doing. And as far as the liberals and the Democrats are going on, the reason for their panic is obvious. They don't have the White House. They don't have control of the Senate. They don't have control of the House. No judiciary. They only have control of 1/3 of the state legislatures. This election was a disaster for them. And it wasn't the fault of Vladimir Putin. It wasn't the fault of James Comey. It was the Clintons' long history of crimes and corruptions that the corporate media still will not touch. And they're starting to turn on each other. Clinton advisors are now pointing their fingers at Huma Abedin and the tight inner circle of Hillary Clinton, saying that they simply reinforced the bad habits. They didn't adapt to the changing realities. So all we need is for one of them to defect and go public, and that will start to unravel things. The Hillary Clinton campaign is also faulting Obama's White House, saying he did not respond strongly enough to suspected Russian election hacks. I guess Hillary thinks he should have nuked Moscow. But again, there's no evidence for it, and we certainly can't take the word of the government and the corporate media that lied to us about Saddam's nuclear weapons about Russian hacking. Well, they're thrashing around looking for excuses. Bill Clinton is now out there saying Hillary Clinton lost because of those blanking white males. It's all the fault of those white males. Still avoiding Hillary's list of crimes as the real reason for her defeat. They're angry. We weren't supposed to know that stuff. The peasants have revolted. They got too smart. They got too informed. They weren't supposed to do that. Obama, in his turn, is now pointing the finger of blame at the corporate media, saying she wasn't treated fairly during the election. Now, come on, we all know the corporate media, especially CNN, they're fully on board with the Hillary Clinton campaign. There was that Podesta email that was leaked out, how 64 of the top executives and prostitutes and correspondents and talking heads from the corporate media were all having dinner with Podesta and all buddy-buddy about how they were going to sell Hillary Clinton to the American people. And I guess Obama is thinking they didn't work hard enough. They weren't biased enough. They have failed the empire. There's a new WikiLeaks out. This is being reported over at Agenda21Radio.news, where apparently the latest WikiLeaks are showing 6 Republicans who took secret payments from Clinton to help destroy Donald Trump. Which tells you once again there really isn't that much difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. They're all just a bunch of corrupt losers. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog. The real reason why Hillary Clinton's classified emails were never released, apparently what is in them is so bad it would discredit the entire government. And I think it was that Hillary was selling secrets to foreign governments through that weak email server and collecting and laundering the payments through that so-called charitable foundation. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And the fact of the matter is, there is actual hard evidence of hacking into the voting system of the United States, of the various states. And the corporate media isn't touching it. Why? Because it didn't come from Russia. Georgia, Kentucky, and West Virginia have all confirmed attempts at intrusion by the Department of Homeland Security going all the way back to the primaries. So I'm sure Hillary's going to say, well, Vladimir Putin, he broke into the Department of Homeland Security so he could use their computer and all this other stuff. I mean, it really is ridiculous here. Now, apparently 4 more states are now investigating that they may have also been hacked by the Department of Homeland Security. So, getting kind of ugly here. Now, Donald Trump has announced that he is keeping his private security detail right alongside the Secret Service. I think that's a very good thing for him to do. Donald Trump is going into the White House angering as much of the entrenched oligarchical establishment as John F. Kennedy did. And I wish him well, but I'll be very, very pleasantly surprised if he survives his 4 years in office. Because the people he's up against are desperate. The CIA needs to prove they're still in control of the real world. The CIA needs to keep a lid on all their drug smuggling into the United States of America. The bankers want to keep their unfettered access to your wallets. The war hawks want war. It's very intense out there. Now, you want to hear the absolute most beautiful illustration of hypocrisy? Apparently, Barack Obama sent a message to Donald Trump via an interview saying that he shouldn't use too many executive orders. And, because it can be difficult to undo them once you've signed them. And, of course, Obama, set the all-time record for executive orders. And he doesn't want Trump undoing them, which is exactly what Trump is going to do. So let's get back into this corporate media and their assault on the fake news, which they mean is us. And in a way, it's backfiring because it has demonstrated to the world that the independent media has become a major shaper of public opinion. And the corporate media is just having a hissy fit over that. They loved having a monopoly. They loved dominating the flow of information in our society, and that monopoly is now broken, and that's why they're in this hysterical panic, trying to find some way that they can lure Americans back to trusting their lies and not pay attention when independent media around the world keep pointing out, look, they lied about Saddam's nuclear weapons, they lied about Assad's sarin gas. They lied when they told you Hillary was going to win in a landslide. They were lying when they claimed the Electoral College might overturn Donald Trump. It's all they know how to do. It's what they're paid to do. That's their business model. They're paid those huge paychecks to be very convincing liars and salespeople, to be prostitutes and correspondents. And all of a sudden, they're in trouble. They can't change the business model. Their corporate backers aren't going to write those big fat paychecks just to put the truth out there when the truth can be had out here for free with just a little effort on the part of citizens. You can find out what's going on for yourself. But the reality is people are now awake and they're looking back at all the times the government and the corporate media lied to us all to start wars. Torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, Lusitania not carrying weapons, Pearl Harbor was a surprise. And Saddam's nuclear weapons, let's not forget that one. And on and on and on. And they're losing audience, they're losing ad revenues. Some of their backers are already pulling back on the money that's being poured in there. MSNBC just shut down one of its shows. The New York Times is closing 8 floors in its offices to turn them into rental properties. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I guess my BAM user feed is maxed out. I'm getting emails from people saying they can't see it. But it is working from here, and somebody in the chat room says it's working where they are. So it may be more interference from the tantrum people who are throwing a tantrum and are going to throw a major tantrum after Texas finally finishes going through the process of replacing the absent electors here. Now, let's get on back here. By the way, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. The corporate media has basically destroyed itself by destroying its own credibility by standing shoulder to shoulder with a government that controls us with lies, fraud, and deceptions. And we've gone down the list so many times, and we pointed out how it's not unusual when you catch the government lying to you. It's how they do things. It's business as normal for them. And they're upset that all of a sudden we're not believing the bovine excrement they're shoveling at us at a high rate of speed. But the corporate media is in economic trouble. They have very high overheads, and we're hearing about all these corporate media outlets that are basically having to let staff go because they're losing their audience. MSNBC has just quietly pulled the plug on their afternoon show, Live with Thomas Roberts. They're starting to pull off shows that just don't have audience anymore because nobody likes a liar. And it doesn't matter how expensive a set you have in that newsroom and how beautiful the blondes are and how tight their clothing is. People are naturally going to go where they think they're going to find out the information they need to have to make those good choices. Now, of course, Obama is out there basically sounding like an old Soviet apparatchik, saying that we have to silence the domestic propagandists and the independent media. It's all their fault because what they're reporting is what our enemies are reporting, and therefore they're all in cahoots against us. Now, basically what it is the whole world knows the U.S. government and the corporate media are a bunch of liars, and we're all nodding our heads in agreement. That doesn't make us an evil plot of any kind. It simply means we all understand that you've been lying to us all along, and we basically wish it to come to an end. Because, again, you're working against your own track record. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Remember that one, echoed by the corporate media. No boots on the ground in Syria. Remember that big whopper, Mr. Obama. Remember when you tried to claim that chemical weapons in Syria were being used by Assad, and even the United Nations came out and said, no, it's the U.S.-backed rebels. And, of course, the big whopper, our strategy to fight ISIS will succeed, and that one is going down in flames even as I speak. So where is the real fake news coming from? And in order to understand that, you need to remember, back in 2013, Congress passed a law, the National Defense Authorization Act, which included an amendment that said it's now legal for the U.S. government to use propaganda on you through the corporate media to influence your opinion. In other words, you're not allowed to make up your own mind anymore. We, the government, will make it up for you. And if you are a loyal American, you will believe the bovine excrement we are shoveling at you, no matter how badly it smells and how ridiculous it all sounds. All right, let's go ahead and take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I don't know if you, I know you talked about the truck in Berlin or / lorry. That had supposedly plates from Poland, there would be your open borders, Angela Merkel, Francois Hollande, Obama, Clinton.
Yeah, that could very well be. But again, German media is under orders from the German government. If one of the refugees does something, no matter how bad it is, they're not allowed to identify that it's one of the refugees. And so we may see this. They may either concoct some completely out of the blue story about this, or simply say it was a terror attack, we don't know by who, or we can't say by who.
Well, they said that the owner, his cousin or something, was supposed to drive the truck and it got hijacked. That's the going story right now.
Okay, that would make a lot of sense. That would make a lot of sense.
But I don't believe in coincidences, Mike, and what's the chance of the Russian ambassador to Turkey getting shot 5 times in the back the same day this happens? There's another agenda going on. So these people have longer arms than Stretch Armstrong. They're not going to stop. It's all some kind of effort.
Okay, well, I think the agenda in Ankara was to prevent this coming three-way negotiation between Turkey, Russia, and Iran as to how to resolve the Syria situation, to which the United States pointedly was not invited. And this is the U.S. Attempt to try and split Turkey and Russia, because Turkey's been pivoting toward Russia ever since that botched attempt at a coup d'etat by the U.S. And so this is their way to try and do that. But apparently everybody is seeing through it, and the Russians are already saying it's an act of terror. We grieve for the loss of our ambassador, but we're moving ahead with the meeting. Now, as far as what happened in Berlin, we don't know yet. I mean, I haven't been paying as much attention to that because of what's going on in the Electoral College and what was going on in Ankara. But a question I would like to know, and maybe you have the answer, did they capture the driver alive, or is the driver also conveniently dead?
They said they captured the driver, but at first they said that they're looking for him because he wasn't in the cab. There was two people supposedly in the cab. There's always two people, but there was only one, and he supposedly got away, but they caught him at a zoo.
Okay, so
I don't know.
All right, so we'll find out what's going to be happening there. It could very easily be one of these out-of-control refugees. They have been lured away from their homes to Europe with promises of all kind of free stuff, and they haven't been getting it. They're acting out their rage and their frustration. And this could be legitimately an after effect of this attempt to blur all the world's populations together. But coming as it may just be a coincidence that it happened at the same time as the assassination. There's obviously a motive for the assassination. Coupling it with a truck running into people in Berlin, I'm not sure, unless Berlin was an attempt to distract us from what was going on with the ambassador's assassination, which could very well be what's happening there. Anything else?
Yeah, because that truck, like that represents closing the borders. That incident, you know what I mean?
Yes.
That's one thing I wouldn't understand why it would have something to kind of it just seems odd. I'm like that. The linkage to maybe the shooter in Turkey to the Gulen school, who's in Pennsylvania, who's linked to CIA, Hillary Clinton. People need to look at how much money this school makes. You know, this is like a front.
Oh, they're very well funded.
Muslim Brotherhood. Is that tied to the Muslim Brotherhood, though?
Mm-hmm.
You know? Yeah, it's all that same group, you know, so that's all I wanted to share, Mike.
Okay, well, we're going to let you go then. Now, getting on back, as you know, the Washington Post decided that they were going to smear the independent media by saying we're all Russian stooges based on this website, Prop or Not, which went to very, very great lengths to conceal who was behind it. They registered the domain through one of these private domain registration systems, so you don't know who it belongs to, because the who is stops at the registration company. The business address that was listed for the organization turned out to be one of these offices that are used as postal fronts. And it's a one-room office in New Mexico, and there are about 30, 40 different businesses using it as an address. But a lot of people have been digging into this thing, and what they're finding out are links between Prop or Not and Soros, CIA, MI6, all tied together, trying to create this website in order to make this lie and then have the corporate media pick it up and report it as truth. The Washington Post has backed off, saying we're not sure, and Prop or Not did, in fact, come on out and declare that they weren't sure about the story. They were reporting it because Prop or Not reported it, but they weren't putting their reputation on the line for that. And then Prop or Not, of course, came on out and said, well, our reasoning for declaring these media outlets to be part of organized Russian propaganda was they linked to Russia Today. That was it. That was the entire criteria. And so that really did fall apart. Anyway, let's see, moving on down here. Now, as you know, there's this big push, to block what is being called fake news on social media like Facebook. Now, fake news is just a name they've come up with to demonize anybody who was not on board with whatever their informational agenda happens to be. We're real news when we tell you Saddam had nuclear weapons. They're fake news when they tell you that was a lie. And it's got some heavy backing. And as you know, Facebook has announced they're going to have these independent third-party individuals doing the fact-checking on the news, all of which are known liberal, highly biased online filtering systems. What's going to happen, and indeed it's already happening, is that the people are going to stop using Facebook, and they're going to start signing on to these new startup social medias, which are taking off, huge successes they're going to turn into. Because people, if they try and turn Facebook and LinkedIn and all these other places into just more filtered news sources like CNN, people are going to turn them off just the way they've turned CNN off. It isn't how it's delivered. It isn't who is delivering. It's the content. Are we getting all the facts unfiltered? And if you're not, they're going to go someplace else. That's what's going to happen. They're going to wreck Facebook by doing this. Now, one of the Facebook fact checkers, PolitiFact, turns out to be funded by a major Clinton Foundation donor, Alberto Ibargüen, president and CEO of Knight Foundation, and apparently one of PolitiFact's largest contributors, also donated $200,000 to support the 8th annual Clinton Global Initiative University meeting in February 2015. So it's all tied up with that whole liberal situation. They're trying to basically create this illusion of a broad-based support for removing fake news from the eyes of the American people. Okay, it does look like our server's been hacked. People are complaining they can't sign in and can't see the BAM user. And we did have several very heavy attacks. So I'm going to work on this on the next commercial break, so stay tuned on this one. Story coming out of Breitbart. Fake news issue part of media outrage that the peasants have revolted. I mentioned this before. Basically what's going on is the government and the corporate media got used to just telling whatever lies they felt they needed to tell, and the American people, gullible and naive, would just automatically say, oh, that must be the real world. Well, now the American people are realizing that they live in a real-life version of the Matrix, just constantly surrounded by illusion, and they're waking up. They're taking the red pill, to take that metaphor. Or like the hosts in Westworld, they're waking up to the larger reality around them. Or if you're more interested, go back and read Plato's Analogy of the Cave. That's a real good illustration of what we're dealing with here. So, it's a revolution if you think about it. We are seeing already the revolution. It is, thankfully, a virtual revolution. It's taking place in cyberspace. And that means people can go about their lives without risk of being shot or bombed, because it's a revolution in the virtual computer world. But it's still a revolution. And it started right now. And those of us who refuse to just go along and believe what the corporate media and the government are saying, we're the revolutionaries. Viva la revolution. Now, of course, what the government and corporate media are going to do remains unknown. They are desperate. They are cornered. And nothing's more dangerous than a cornered animal. And how ugly and real-world violent this could get is unfortunately totally up to them. Now, as you know, Barack Obama is out here on the island of Oahu for his Christmas holiday, and so far the traffic jams have all been on the other side of the island, which is great. And by the time that the Obamas leave our island in 3 weeks, the total for all of the Obama vacations at taxpayer expense will be over $100 million. Now, there is supposed to be a rule that the government and the taxpayer pay for all expenses related to official business. If you're the president in the White House and you're having a dinner with delegates and ambassadors and everything, the taxpayers cover that. If you're the president in the White House and you're up in the residence eating a pizza, you pay for that pizza personally. A lot of presidents don't like that, but that's the way the rules are set up. So why did Obama get to use Air Force One and everything else for a personal vacation? I understand security, but he didn't need to bring the big plane. There are smaller planes, more cost-effective planes. Richard Nixon, among his many other crimes, was he established what was called the imperial presidency. And we still have it, and I think it needs to go away when presidents take that much advantage of the situation for fun. It is a little out of control. I'm actually glad that Trump canceled the new Air Force One. I know that Boeing stock took a hit, and I know that Boeing workers are going to feel the pain on that one. But it really is more jet than a world leader needs, if you think about it. It's supposed to be a statement. We have the biggest plane, therefore we are the mightiest nation. We are the richest nation. In point of fact, we're number 9. In terms of per capita gross domestic product, we're the 9th richest nation on earth. Qatar is the richest. Their per capita gross domestic product is more than twice that of the American people. Just something for you to think about on that issue of are we a great nation or not anymore. All right, let's take George in Texas. And George, I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike?
Doing great.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
You know the thing is, Southeast Texas, boy, we got a cold blast coming through. And you know the thing is, it's more like, I'm just saying, we ought to blame the Russians for sending an Arctic blast.
Absolutely. They boxed it up in Siberia, and they just sent it on down here. Gosh darn that Putin.
He hacked the weather. And
yes.
Those Hillary supporters that they're hoping to flip the electoral college vote, hate to say it, but butt hurt is not covered by Obamacare. So.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, actually, not much is covered by Obamacare. You know, that's a big problem there.
But you know, the thing is, it's more like everything they're saying now, we just make a joke about it. It's more like blame the Russians.
That's the best way to do it. That's the best way to do it. You know, I was telling Santa Claus down at the shopping mall, all that stuff that's on my naughty list, Russia made me do that, so I'm off the hook. George, stay on the line. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and Russia is behind waxy yellow buildup, and Russia is behind the fact that my car won't start in the morning and all the rest. And yeah, you're right. Poking fun at it is the best way to do it, and just make the whole thing look ridiculous. Because ultimately, if you think about it, it is ridiculous. This blame Russia for everything, it's complete and utter nonsense. George, are you there?
Yeah, yes, I am. And you know the thing is, even like Saturday Night Live, where they used to be very satirical and humor, you know, it's sort of like, one for the turn for the worse. The last SNL opening thing, where you had Hillary Clinton pretending to be a Christmas calendar saying, Trump is going to kill us all if you don't change your electoral college vote. You know, and it's just the thing is, the less sense of humor, Mike, I hate to say it, it's just dehumanizing. It's not tasteful. It's not in good taste.
Well, the new Saturday Night Live, unfortunately, has been co-opted. In fact, most of the so-called corporate media comedy shows are very much co-opted to present from a particular point of view. But ordinary people, you can make fun of this stuff, and you should. Especially as we go into this holiday season, Christmas and New Year's, you're going to go to a lot of parties, and just make fun of it all. And send a message. This is all completely ridiculous.
Another thing, too, it's more like, once Trump goes past the 270 threshold, the other obstacle, I don't think is much of an obstacle, but I think there's be more jokes and more humor, is when January 9th comes and Congress, certifies the electoral college votes, and I can see those disputes from Democrats coming up, and they're all going to be stupid. Ridiculous. Unfounded.
Absolutely. Okay?
All right. Well, thank you, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot, George. We're going to switch over to Michael in Dallas. Aloha, Michael. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Michael, are you there? Michael?
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air. What's on your mind today?
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Hey, I just wanted to point out a couple things about the whole airplane programs and stuff like that. I know we've been harping on the F-35 program being like one of the biggest blunders in pretty much all military history. But I also want to point out that I just believe it's a shell program because I don't know if you noticed, probably last year you had in Amarillo 2 unidentified, I don't know, I don't want to go UFO status, but yeah, you had 2 identified, like, U.S. planes flying overboard, and I just think just that the F-35 is just a big shell program for.
It's all about making money. It's all about making money. That was the whole point of the Cold War. Huge amounts of money to the defense contractors. They produce junk that looks good, but doesn't need to perform because it's never going to be used. And they fell back into that same pattern over the last couple of decades. And there's nothing new there. Harry Truman was dealing with exactly the same thing in the run-up to World War II. All these military contractors who were just sucking the government and the people dry, and they weren't actually producing anything that was going to be effective. And that's really what made Truman very, very popular, which basically launched him on his eventual path to being the president.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, have you touched on that whole ambassador getting assassinated in Turkey yet?
Yes, yes, we have, and we've gone into the motives on that. I'm going to have to let you go. We've got to do a station identification break, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And let's see, we finished with George. We're talking with Michael in Dallas. Michael, are you still there? Or he dropped. Okay, then we're going to go to Scott in Virginia. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I was just wondering, with the WikiLeaks emails about Hillary Clinton's emails between her advisors.
Yes.
I haven't seen one where they're talking about their strategy on combating global warming, helping the poor, helping people who don't have health insurance, who fall through the cracks, or Obamacare is being. I don't see any emails about helping people.
Yeah, and Obama tells us that those emails are business as usual, and we shouldn't be upset by what's in them. But it does reveal what's going on. It's all about grabbing power and grabbing money, and to heck with the people. Once you've voted for us and we have your tax money and your children for wars, you're of no use to us. Why should we care?
Well, I had a question for you. I've never been 100% sure about Julian Assange. What's your gut instinct about this guy? Is he for real, or what do you think? When
WikiLeaks first surfaced, I had concerns because only a few months after he declared the domain, he was the darling of the corporate media. He had his picture on the front cover of Time and Newsweek, and he hadn't even leaked anything at that point. But it was just, this PR campaign to make him a household name, and my concern at that time, especially based on his record from his youth, where he was kind of on the other side of the law for a bit, I thought it might be sort of an attempt by the U.S. government to trick whistleblowers into going to WikiLeaks so that they could be identified and dealt with. And maybe there was some of that going on. But certainly, more recently, Assange definitely comes across as having taken an adversarial position to the corruption that's going on in this country. And there is no question that the information that he has released has done a great deal of good in terms of educating the American people about the true nature of our political class.
Do you think that Trump will do anything to help Assange, and do you think he would do anything to help Manning?
I would like to see that happen. I would like to see Trump pardon Leonard Peltier and Mumia al-Jabbar as well. But as far as Assange is concerned, that sex case against him is already falling apart with the revelation that the young lady who was involved didn't want to press charges, that the police were working with her trying to get Assange, that the FBI had actually gone to Iceland trying to get Iceland to frame Assange for something, and Iceland kicked them on out. So at this point, Assange is now free of that Ecuadorian embassy by order of the United Nations, and I think that situation is going to resolve. The other one that we need to get a pardon for, of course, is Edward Snowden, because he was a whistleblower, and a long time ago in this country, there were laws that protected whistleblowers. Snowden did not steal U.S. government secrets and sell them to foreign donors to his charitable foundation. he blew the whistle on the fact that the U.S. government was in violation of the Constitution. And that was important information for all the American people to know and understand. And so this attempt to punish him by screaming espionage and the rest of it, that does need to be undone, and I certainly hope that Trump will consider doing that.
Well, I hope so, too, because I find it very interesting that the Democrats have a problem with their emails being looked at, but they have no problem, but they really crucified Snowden for letting us know that the government was looking at all our emails.
Well, I mean, that's part of that whole church of liberalology. We have to have privacy. We're important people. You can't know what we're doing, but you should not have any secrets from us. And again, it's the rise of that two-tiered society, which is anathema to what the United States is supposed to be. This nation was founded as a nation of laws that apply to everybody equally. We can't tolerate, we can't afford a two-tiered society where the rich elites are allowed to get away with everything and only the lower classes are tightly constrained. That's called feudalism, and I thought we'd kind of left that behind back in the Middle Ages.
Well, I hope, based on what you just said, that Hillary is given a fair trial and a fair sentence, because she's obviously guilty. And if we're going to go after her, we might as well go after that guy that lied us into Iraq.
Well, he's actually facing trial out in California right now. We don't know what's going to happen. And the ugly reality is that if the full scale and scope of what the Clintons and Bushes have done were made public, it would delegitimize the entire government, and that would be a real mess for Donald Trump to have to deal with. So, Hillary's got the blackmail goods on everybody that she's done business with, going back to Operation Screwworm. What I think we are more likely to see is that the Clintons will decide that it's time to retire, and they're going to retire to someplace without extradition, and there'll be a whole bunch of other high-level people. The Bushes bought this huge chunk of land down in South America, almost big enough to be a country itself, and they'll probably retire on down there. We could see a bug out of that entire upper level of narcocracy.
One last question, Mike. Do you think the truth about 9/11 will ever come out, and do you think Trump should know the truth about it? Being a builder and developer in the heart of New York City, do you think he really knows what happened on 9/11, and do you think he would reveal it to us?
Well, first of all, we already know what happened on 9/11. We know the government lied. So that's already been accomplished. Will the government ever officially, formally acknowledge the lie? No, that's never going to happen, and we should not care anyway, because we should not cede to the government the authority to tell us what's real or not, given their long history of lying. I think Trump has expressed his doubts about the official story of 9/11, given his experience as a builder. As to whether he's going to do anything about it or not, he may not, because, again, official recognition that was a false flag could delegitimize the entire government and bring it down. Trump's hardest job in office is going to be dealing with the corruption, draining that swamp without collapsing the entire government in the process. We don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak.
But if sending these people to jail is going to delegitimize the government, how are we ever going to get tyranny out of the government?
Well, we get tyranny out of the government by slowly working our way back to a constitutional republic with democratic elections that are honest, fair, and transparent, so that we, the people, can regain control over the country. I agree with you. I would love to see these people in prison, and my sense of justice and honor says that we should see them all in prison, but I understand the political reality that on their way to prison, the Clintons can cause a great deal of damage to a lot of people around them. And that's one of the reasons why this establishment has been in such lockstep around the Clintons against Donald Trump, because they're all, to one extent or another, looking at fines, banishment from public office, or jail time.
Do you think Trump can pull off getting a bank, a national bank that's owned by us? Do you think he can do that?
I would like to see him try, but if you've read my article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, the owners of those private central banks will do anything, with a capital A, to keep us their debt slaves. They will assassinate leaders. They will start wars. They will wreck a country rather than allow any country to break free of the debt slavery system with which they've imprisoned planet Earth for 300 years now.
But with Brexit happening and then Trump winning the presidency, hasn't this surprised the establishment? Couldn't there be another surprise where he takes the bank away from them?
Could be. And we're going to have to stand around him and work with him. Donald Trump by himself is not going to accomplish anything in office unless we, the American people, are standing shoulder to shoulder with him and glaring at those members of the House of Representatives and the senators and the people on Wall Street and say, progress has arrived, times are changing, and you better wake up to that or things are going to get really, really ugly. So I'd like to see a lot of changes, but again, the hard part is how much can we change without wrecking the good parts of our society that still remain? That's a very, very, very difficult problem to have to solve.
And I see where you're coming from, but that seems like a type of argument that might have been made before the revolution by a Tory, or someone saying, well, let's adopt some of these things. Let's not wreck the whole system. And then you had the revolutionaries saying, listen, we've got to take chances. We've got to scrap this whole thing.
Well, we're already having a revolution, as I mentioned before. It's a virtual revolution. It's online, which I think is preferable to revolution in the real world with all of the bloodshed and destruction of landscaping and harm to the tourism industry appertaining thereto. But, yeah, we need to recognize the revolution has already started, and it's happening here online. And so far, we are making headway towards changing the system, which is the point of a revolution, which is to change the system for the better. And revolutions can be peaceful, or they can be violent, as John Kennedy said. Right now, the revolution is peaceful. I'd like to see it stay that way.
Well, thank you for your show. And if I could sum your show up in just in one sentence is, you tell people not to believe everything they hear and see. I mean, it's pure and simple. And then do your own homework.
That's basically it, yeah. You know, I'm not even asking you to trust me because I can make mistakes. I've been suckered by some of these fake news people that are put on out there. You need to be your own best analyst and your own best researcher. And I know you can all do it. Despite Common Core and mass media brainwashing, you're all smart people. You can figure out what's going on if you're willing to invest the time and effort to do that.
Country. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you very much here. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're going to go to John in Barbados. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Yes. Well, I nearly fell off my chair a few callers ago when he explained that the butt-hurt liberals, it's not covered by Obama.
Yeah, that was a good joke. I liked that one.
That was brilliant. But more importantly now, it's being intimated that this guy, this special ops policeman who killed the Russian ambassador in Turkey is actually NATO, which says to me it's American.
Well, I think the fact that the United States claimed they had a security incident at their embassy at the same time, I mean, that's a classic, oh, we're victims too, so don't suspect us of any wrongdoing, on our part. But the Russian government is already saying this was a planned operation by a NATO member nation. Jerusalem Post is reporting that the assassin was under investigation by Turkish authorities. Okay, I don't know what that was. Was under investigation by Turkish authorities for links to the cleric Gulen, and right there is your means for the CIA to go to Gulen and say, have your asset in Turkey's Special Forces Police, whack this guy in order to derail the meeting between Russia, Turkey, and Iran over what's going on in Syria. So that's means, motive, and opportunity right there.
I'm looking at all this nonsense coming out of the mainstream media. It seems to be just exploding in well, it's so totally ridiculous. The idea that, Russia hacked the American election. I don't know how they managed it because none of the electronic equipment, neither the the counting, the vote machines, or,
let's
the voting machines.
Let's step back one step here. If Putin had the capacity to interfere in other nations' elections, Poroshenko would have lost the election that validated his imposition as a puppet ruler of Ukraine, and we wouldn't have had 8 years of Obama, would we?
Well, it amazes me that people can imagine that the Russians are more stupid than the Americans, and they wouldn't be able to hide where all this information was coming from. Of course they would be able to hide it. They can do a false flag and blame Saudi Arabia or anybody else for it, just as the Americans can. It's nonsense. The whole thing is nonsense.
It is absolute nonsense. Russia is stealing socks from my dryer kind of thing.
And finally, this attack in Germany with the attack on the marketplace with a heavy goods vehicle. I'm hearing strange things that I'm not entirely believing what people are saying, but there's something strange about this attack that just doesn't ring true. And whenever I look at a situation, Michael, I think, put myself in the position of whoever's perpetrating it, would I really do that, or would I do this? And if I would, if me in my head, I would never do that sort of thing. I would do it a different way. I just dismiss it because, use your common sense. People need to use the common sense. Look for what should be there and isn't, like you've been saying for years.
Okay. The issue is a complicated one. They're basically they're actually using the big lie technique that Adolf Hitler warned everybody against in Mein Kampf. And by the way, that's another big lie you've been told. In Mein Kampf, Hitler wasn't recommending the use of the big lie. He was sounding a warning against it, which is if you get a whole bunch of people all saying the same thing, that, people will tend to believe it. And the more outrageous it is, the more people want to believe it. And Russia hacking the election fits exactly that model of the big lie. And as that former chair of the House Intelligence Committee said, came on out and said, basically what you've got are just a bunch of CIA people calling up their media assets and saying, Russia hacked the election, you can take my word for it, and just go to town on that and say I'm an unnamed source in the intelligence community. And that's basically how the stuff got planted.
And finally, Michael, I want to hear you announce on live radio that Donald Trump has passed the 270 mark and is now officially the American president.
Well, I'm keeping an eye on that, but they're still going through the procedural stuff down in Texas that was caused by the disqualification of two of the electors. I don't know whether one of them was that faithless elector, the guy with the Ashley Madison account, but apparently 4 electors failed to show up at the state capitol. That may have something to do with the fact that the snow is now down to the Texas Panhandle, and the highways and the roads are just all messed up down there. But they're still going through this procedural thing of selecting alternate electors, and at some point they'll move forward. But at this point, it's only a matter of time, and as soon as Texas does come in and pledge their 38 electoral votes to Donald Trump, I will be announcing it on the air. I'll be up on the roof with a bottle of scotch and a cigar, and all kinds of celebrations will then be forthcoming.
Well, so the Texas board of electors, have been foiled by this global warming powder falling from the sky.
Apparently. Absolutely, apparently. Well, we don't know. I mean, I hope nothing bad has happened to these absent electors. There may have been huge protests outside their home, and they didn't feel safe leaving their home. But right now, Occam's razor is saying they just simply couldn't get there because of the highway weather conditions.
Okay, Michael, thanks for having me on again, and I'm looking forward to that announcement.
All right, me too, and we're going to switch over to Danny in Tennessee. Aloha, Danny. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, well, just an idea that first kind of brought up, I think, a while back. Somebody called in after Lady Gaga announced the Super Bowl.
Okay, Danny,
And
we've got a bad connection here, and you're talking about boycotting the Super Bowl advertisers because of the halftime entertainment.
right.
Okay.
And kind of start that ahead of time. Let it be known ahead of time that the group is getting together and we're trying to spread that. And then instead of not watching the Super Bowl, you watch it to make a list of who advertises with her there.
Okay, I think that's an excellent idea. I think it's an excellent idea. We've already seen major corporations, they're so fragile in terms of the bottom line that even a little pressure from consumers can have devastating effects on them. We got to let you go here, Danny. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And turning to the war zones, we see yet another illustration of the so-called real news, the corporate media, feeding us a long line of bovine excrement about what's going on in Syria. Now, the U.S. has been trying to overthrow Bashar al-Assad for going on 5 years now. And originally it was Assad is an evil dictator, he's a tyrant, he's cruel to his people, he's torturing them, he puts kittens in blenders, he passes wind in the elevators, I mean, all this stuff. Then Syria had an election which had international observers who were, by the way, not allowed to look at our presidential election, just a little reminder there. And Assad won overwhelmingly again. So then it just turned to Assad has got weapons of mass destruction, and he's got all these horrible things, and he's using them on his own people, and he's got chemical weapons stocks. And Russia stepped on in and negotiated the destruction of Syria's chemical weapons arsenal. Then the U.S. came back and said, Assad lied, he still has chemical weapons, and he's gassing his own people with them, without having any kind of a believable explanation for why Assad would do something that's stupid, thereby opening the door to a U.S. invasion. And then, of course, independent observers, including the United Nations Chemical Weapons Inspectors, came on out and said, no, these chemical weapons are being brought into Syria and given to the U.S.-sponsored rebel groups to use on civilians to blame on Bashar al-Assad. And then that fell apart, and then the U.S. said, well, we're bombing Syria, not to bomb Syria, we're going into Syria as part of the war on terror. We're going after ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and we're going to just surgically remove them from Syria. And whoopsie, we bombed a hospital, and gee, we're sorry about that petroleum facility and the food warehouses and the water supply. I don't know why we keep missing them. And it's just been on and on and on. One lie after the other, after the other, after the other, all of them fed to you, spoon-fed to you by the corporate media, who are now in a huff that you refuse to believe what you're being spoon-fed by them anymore. And you peasants, you're rebelling, you're turning to the independent media and foreign sources to find out what's going on. How dare you not believe our lies? Real Americans believe the bovine excrement. And now that Aleppo is pretty much back under Syrian control, and they're turning their attention to Palmyra, we're seeing the U.S. government, the European Union, and the corporate media in both continue to demonize Russia. Oh, it's all Russia's fault. Russia's behind all the suffering of those Syrian people. Oh, it's all their fault. They should have never gone in there. No, if you were really concerned about the Syrian people, you shouldn't have tried to overthrow their government 5 years ago. And we hear all this talk about humanitarian crisis from the EU and the United States. Who's actually sending in humanitarian assistance? Russia is. What we have here is a case of sour grapes by the U.S. and the European Union. And you're supposed to just go along with it. Oh, we're good. Russia's bad. That's all you need to know. Don't think about anything else. Now, over the weekend, a big stink began. Apparently, in the cleaning out of Aleppo by the Syrian forces, they captured officers and instructors from NATO nations, including one American, one Israeli, some Brits, Germany, France, Turkey, 14 in all. I guess they didn't have cyanide pills with them, and the United Nations apparently had a closed-door Security Council meeting about this, The U.S. official position is they're just observers. They weren't actually there being involved in, they were just observers, so that we had the real story about Assad's atrocities against his own people. And the Syrian government has also found yet more evidence of the U.S.-sponsored rebel groups using mustard gas against civilians. That is nasty, nasty stuff. And I know because my maternal grandfather lost an entire lung to German mustard gas in big mistake number 1. So it is nasty stuff. All right, got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. It is now official. Texas just completed their electoral college and delivered 36 electoral votes to Donald Trump. There were 2 faithless electors, but it doesn't really matter. Donald Trump now has 304 electoral votes, certifying, validating that he is, in fact, the President of the United States of America, barring the unforeseen. And the Hillary people are screaming and crying and wailing, and they're already attacking my server, throwing a tantrum on that. But it's now official. So John in Barbados, I promised you the announcement. It just came through on that commercial break. Huzzah, 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 huzzah. All righty, we have a caller waiting on the line. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, what's up, Mike? Hey, congratulations to all of us. Boy, I'll tell you.
Yes.
I was really afraid they were going to pull something.
They may still try and pull something, but look at the track record. The riots didn't work. The Jill Stein recounts not only did not work, they backfired by exposing massive pro-Hillary election fraud in the various states. The threats against the electors didn't work. I talk about a track record of failure. And, of course, we can expect the snowflakes to be just crying and wringing their hands. And maybe they'll, here's an idea for the liberalologists. Maybe it's time that you take the lesson from Jonestown and form a mass suicide cult. That would do everybody a lot of good. Yeah, they're attacking my server right now. They're just having a tantrum and a hissy fit and saying, "Where did I get that? WhatReallyHappened.com? He spoiled it for us." Then I can't say it on the radio.
Hey, you can go to Glenn Beck. You can let Glenn Beck be the ringleader as far as the Jim Jones. That's my nickname for him. I always, when I attack him on Facebook or Twitter, I call him Glenn Jim Jones Beck. So he'd be the one to organize that,
Yeah, well, they're definitely. And I'm expecting my server is probably going to be unreachable for the next 24 hours because they're all going to be acting out their rage and frustration. How dare they not anoint Empress Hillary the First?
But anyway, what I was really wanting to talk to you about is Syria.
Yes.
What I'm doing with Syria is I'm, on my Facebook, I've got Syrian Republic. Okay, and I suggest everybody likes that Facebook site, Syrian Republic. It's called. And they give you the truth. They show you the celebrations, and of course, RT does also of the Syrian troops liberating Aleppo.
Yes.
And then what I do is I post it on Newsfeed and tell people share, 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 and share. The more that stuff gets around, the less influence the corporate lying fake news media has. Because like I see every time, like I was at gym today, and again on Fox News, that they'll always find a way to demonize Syria, demonize Assad in Syria. And even a lot of your fellow talk show hosts, I'm not talking about the independent media talk show hosts on the internet. I'm talking about the ones out, still, I guess you could say they're still the ones kind of right hand in hand with the rest of the media, maybe a little bit further away. Okay, but they're they're also say, they keep reminding you all the time, well, Assad is a bad guy. No, he's not. The only thing I kind of, when you say now that he may be passing wind in the elevator, that might lead something that could be called a chemical attack.
That's probably exactly what they cited. Here's a dose of reality, okay? everybody who aspires to be the leader of a nation, you don't want to trust them. I'm not saying Assad's a good guy, okay? I'm just saying he's not the villain our government portrays him to be in order to justify military action. And I don't think Assad is any better or worse than any other world leader. Some world leaders are better, like Putin. Unfortunately, because of the narcocracy, the United States has been cursed with 30 years of drug-corrupted leadership that has absolutely zero concern for ordinary people in this country. And, of course, above all of that is George Soros' push for the New World Order and the global government and the global private central bank.
You know, I know you say, that he may not be the best guy in the world, but the thing is this. I look at what he's doing and the courage the man shows. That he stays in his country, he stays with his people, and he makes no bones about, who the enemy is and all that. And he's basically an independent guy. I think he's right up there with Putin as a world leader, personally.
Well, any world leader that is focused on their country first becomes a target of the New World Order. That's what happened with Muammar Gaddafi, where Gaddafi was running Libya for the benefit of the Libyan people and the Libyan nation, and the New World Order couldn't have that. His gold dinar was a threat to the West's paper dollar, paper currency. The fact that he'd thrown out the private central bank, that was the unforgivable sin. And so that's where we are right now. This whole 300-year-old system of debt servitude is starting to crack and crumble and come apart.
Okay, I got one question for you, though, Mike. I've been trying to research it and all. Do you think there's some kind of a tie-in, maybe a historical or even a biblical tie-in, between between certain forms of Jewry and certain forms of Islam, mainly the Wahhabi sect of Islam? When you look at the close relationship between Israel and Saudi Arabia, not only these days, but even a lot closer, I think, we think for many years.
Well, let me deal with that as two separate issues. On the religion issue, something everybody needs to remember is that Christianity, Judaism, and Islam all go back to the same source, Abraham, who is credited with being the first monotheist, although there's some argument that Amenhotep IV beat him to that idea. But Judaism began, and then, of course, Joshua, who's his real name. Jesus is an artifact of taking this guy's name and translating it from Aramaic to Greek and then Greek into Latin. Yeshua in English is Joshua, not Jesus. So Joshua came along, and Joshua came along and basically split the religion, and you had Judaism and Christianity, and then later on you had Muhammad that came along and split it again into Islam, and then Islam, of course, split again into Sunni and Shiite. But all of it goes back to that same religious source. So ultimately, there's a common root for everybody to connect with everybody else, as long as you ignore all those opportunists who are screaming, kill the infidel, kill the infidel, kill the infidel. Now, as far as politics, politics is a practical profession. You do business with the people who've got what you want. And any discussions about philosophy or ideology or religion are put out there for consumption by the masses, but they're not really factors in terms of the internal political negotiations. In fact, that caller pointed out very correctly, all the emails leaked out from Podesta and Hillary were all about grabbing more power and wealth for themselves, nothing about how we're going to deal with human-caused global warming, how we're going to deal with poverty, how we're going to deal with joblessness. And that really is the way that they think. So, but, alliances are a shifting thing. The Israelis and Saudis are friends now, but that hasn't always been the case. They've been at war before. One of the reasons I don't have a globe in the house anymore is because those darn lines keep moving.
The what?
The darn lines keep moving between the countries and who's friends with who's and everything.
But I was reading something that the Saudis never really had it in for the Jews, that they even invited them to come into Palestine or Israel at the time, back in the 1920s that they had no problem with it. And that's why I have looked it up. I've tried to find out what it is, any tie-in. Now, you get these
well,
weird
no,
websites,
hang on. Let me respond to what you just said here, because you're absolutely right. If you go back and you look in history, prior to the rise of all this political nonsense about, we're Israel and we've got to have a Jewish-only state, the fact is that during Europe's persecution of the Jews for religious reasons or commercial reasons or whatever, many Jews who left Europe were welcomed into the Arabian lands with open arms, and they all got along just fine. And I'm absolutely convinced, especially by my experience here in Hawaii, that you can have all these different religions together, and they're all going to get along just fine. But all it takes is some fanatic to get on up there and say that you'll not be allowed into heaven unless you die with a sword in your hand, and the rest of it. And people just trapped by those religious beliefs, enslaved by those religious beliefs, are going to start doing some really bizarre and stupid things.
Well, look at Syria. Syria's people get along very well. Despite what people are saying, well, they're persecuting the Alawites, who are a small minority, really, in Syria, are persecuting not the Shiites, the Sunnis. Yet the majority of the Syrian Arab army are Sunni, and they're very loyal. They're loyal to Assad, and they're loyal to the nation of Syria. They're not loyal to some branch of Islam or anything else.
Well, the Alawites are actually Assad supporters. That's why the claim that Assad was using sarin gas on them didn't get any traction. But take a look at Iran. Now, Iran is a very peaceful country. They have not launched a war of aggression against another country in over 200 years. If you're in Iran, the Muslims and the Jews live together just fine. In fact, one of the world's oldest continually operating synagogues is in Iran. And they've got it very good over there. There's no oppression. There's no persecution of any kind. In fact, some years back, Israel tried to offer financial inducements to the Iranian Jews to locate over to Israel, and the Iranian Jews said, no, our lives are here. We're comfortable here. We've got good businesses here. We've got a good synagogue here. There's no reason for us to leave. And yet, in the Western media, Iran wants to kill all the Jews. Iran wants to bring back the Holocaust. And it's just more of this constant lying. But thankfully, fortunately, the world is waking up to the realization that ordinary people can live together in peace and get along with each other. It's politicians and fanatics and those who seek power and wealth that stir us up against each other to create chaos from which they will profit. It's like these private central bankers. It's like these private central bankers constantly starting wars, and they don't care which side wins or loses because they're making money off of both sides.
Sure. All right. I just wanted to ask you that because I'm real curious about some of the things going on there. Just seems like there's so many sides to this coin, and then of course Turkey. To me, Turkey is a pretty dangerous. That Erdogan is a nutcase, and I think Putin's making a big mistake by thinking he can trust Erdogan.
Well, I don't think Putin trusts him any more than Putin trusts anybody else, which is to say, not at all. But what happened in Turkey that turned Erdogan into a loose cannon on the deck was that botched U.S. attempt at a coup d'etat. That's what split Turkey off from seeking membership in the EU, being part of the Western sphere of influence, and pivoted him toward Russia. And I think today's assassination of the Russian ambassador in Ankara was a ham-fisted attempt to try and stop the pivot of Turkey toward Russia. But it's not working because they're going ahead with their three-way negotiations on the situation in Syria. And the U.S. is out there saying, I need to come in, we need to come in, we're in charge of the world, us, we're significant, we're exceptional, we're important. And everybody else is saying, get out of here. Could be. We know that the CIA is tangled up with that cleric Gulen and his church, and apparently Gulen may have directed this individual in Turkey's Special Forces Police to carry out the assassination. But he shot the ambassador, and he had the cameras just continue to run so he could do his little rant saying Aloha Snack Bar and the rest of it. It does feel very, very staged, and they probably told this guy that they had an escape route all set for him. And imagine his surprise when the forces came on in and killed him.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of like Leon Oswald, right?
Well, they were supposed to kill him at the Texas Theater, and they failed because he kept saying, I'm not resisting arrest, I'm not resisting arrest, and that's why they had to cowboy him in the basement of the Dallas police station.
Right. All right, Mike, you're the best. I tell you, you're the best. I try to turn other people out to you and say, look, you know, this guy's the real deal, you know? I don't agree with you 100% on everything, but for the most part, you're right there, you know?
Well, if you agreed with me 100% on everything, I would advise you to seek therapy and counseling right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Have a Merry Christmas, all right?
Same to you. Merry Christmas. I love that we can say Merry Christmas without the other people screaming, oh, you're being insensitive to me. I'm not being insensitive to you. You're on the Christmas card list. I'll tell you what's insensitive. Every year I send a Christmas card to the White House. I've never gotten one back. In fact, the only official response I ever got from the White House was, remember those Mitt Romney Obama puppets from the 2012 election? And I had them on the show here, and when it was all over, I couldn't bring myself to just throw them in the trash, so I boxed them up and I sent them to the White House, attention coordinator for the Obama Presidential Library. So it didn't go to Obama himself. And I got a very nice thank you letter from them, which I treasure. It's in the company history file. All righty, we're coming up here on another break here. Before we get to it, though, apparently over in Yemen, Saudi Arabia has been using British cluster bombs against the civilians inside Yemen. These things are banned in most countries by international treaty, and these particular cluster bombs are the ones where the bomblets have delayed detonation, meaning these cluster bombs are creating, effectively, minefields. And we know how terrible they can be. They're a curse on the blighted nation for years to come until a demining operation can remove them. And again, Saudi Arabia is acting as a U.S. proxy because those people in Yemen dared to stand up and say, we don't want a U.S.-imposed puppet ruler. We don't care if it's internationally agreed upon. This is our country, and you don't get to pick our leaders. And the U.S. is saying, once you are conquered, you will stay conquered. Slaves, we will give you what for refusing our ruler over your country. We're going to take another break for commercials. Back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Somebody just sent me a wonderful cartoon, a couple of puppy dogs, saying, we're so glad you're home. The Russians pooped in the hallway. And that's the best way to deal with all of this. Russia did this, Russia did that. You make fun of it. You know, Russia did all the bad things on the naughty list, so I get a bicycle this year anyway. All right, getting on back to the international scene here. As you know, the American taxpayers are plundered for vast sums of money that the U.S. government then takes and hands out to their friends in other governments as humanitarian assistance, more likely bribes. More than half of that money goes to Israel. And in exchange for that money, Israel will not listen to any of the American government's concerns over this move to retroactively legalize the illegal settlements, which the United Nations has already declared is an absolute violation of international law. And the reason so much of your money goes to Israel, and by the way, the American taxpayer has been forced to give Israel more than 10 times the entire cost of the Apollo Moon program, for which we have not received a giant leap for mankind or even an updated version of Velcro. It's just money that's gone. And all that remains behind is a lot of bloodshed by the Palestinians and the Syrians and the Libyans and the Egyptians and everybody else in that part of the world. Why do we keep doing this? Well, because Israel has this support group called AIPAC, the America-Israel Political Affairs Committee, which for some reason is able to evade the requirement to be registered as a lobbying organization for a foreign government, even though that is all that they do. And they basically have their fingers into the U.S. Congress And basically they're running a kickback scheme. A member of Congress will sit there and vote more money from your pocket to Israel's pocket, and then Israel will funnel a tiny portion of that back into AIPAC, who then donates it to that congressman's next election campaign. That's what it's really all about. Congress doesn't actually believe in Israel, but Israel has control over huge amounts of campaign funding and the corporate media as well. But now that the corporate media is on the wane, we may be able to break our Congress free. And that's the irony that most Americans are still not really on top of yet. We know that other countries do not like being ruled by foreign puppets. Iraq didn't like it, Afghanistan didn't like it, Libya didn't like it, Yemen didn't like it, Syria is fighting against it, Iran is fighting against it. We too are ruled by a puppet regime, a Vichy government that is ruling this nation not for the benefit of the American people and the American nation, but for the benefit of a foreign government over there in Tel Aviv. And that is absolutely what's going on. They've got a lock on our government. We need to break free of it, and that's something else that we can do in this window of opportunity. All right, there we need to do our top of the hour station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're starting to see the corporate media finally grudgingly admit it's official. Donald Trump has surpassed the 270 electoral votes needed to be the next president of the United States of America. Congress will convene on January 6th to formally tally the votes. There doesn't seem to be any way that Hillary can intervene with that, although I'm fully expecting all these random mobs are going to show up to the Congress and say, vote your conscience, Empress Hillary, Empress Hillary, Empress Hillary. The whiners and criers do not want to quit. They can't quit. Hillary Clinton's running her supporters as a personality cult. They have all the classic psychological hallmarks and tactics of a personality cult. That's why I'm starting to call them the liberalologists. So getting into the details here, most of the faithless electors came from the Hillary Clinton states. They had one faithless elector in Colorado tried to vote for Bernie Sanders. He was replaced by an alternate who voted for Clinton because Colorado state law says you vote with the state's popular vote. Over in Maine, a Democratic elector voted for Sanders instead of Clinton, was ruled out of order, and voted for Clinton on the second vote. Minnesota, an elector tried to vote for Sanders, was replaced by an alternate elector. Again, state law says you go with the state's popular vote. Down in Texas, there were two faithless electors. One voted for John Kasich, and one voted for Ron Paul. I think Ron ought to feel very good about that. And basically, 4 of the state's electors broke ranks to vote against Clinton. 3 voted for Colin Powell, and 1 for Faith Spotted Eagle. I didn't even get 1 vote. I'm crushed, absolutely crushed. Now then, getting on back to the war zones here. Let us turn our attention to Barack Obama, who has secured his place in history. His legacy is assured. He is the first Nobel Peace Prize winner to bomb 7 countries after winning the Nobel Peace Prize. That's an accomplishment. I think Barack should feel very proud of that. It should be on a plaque out there in front of the Obama Presidential Library. All right, let's turn to the economic news here. Ukraine has been forced to nationalize its largest bank, which holds 36% of all domestic deposits. And private bank, the Ukraine's largest lender, is saying that the reports it'll be nationalized were attempts to create panic and destabilize the political situation in the country. Well, the political situation is already unstable in Ukraine. That usually happens when a puppet ruler is imposed by an outside power. And for whatever reason, the nationalization has now gone forward. Now, if you're in Italy or if you have money in an Italian bank, you want to listen to this next part. As you know, Italy went to some of these other lenders, the European Central Bank, IMF, World Bank, was turned down flat because they failed to have that referendum which would have consolidated power and enforced more austerity on the Italian people. So the world's oldest bank, Italy's third largest bank, Monte dei Paschi di Siena, is making a last-ditch emergency attempt to convince tens of thousands of ordinary savings account holders to help it escape state hands. In other words, they're talking about a voluntary bail-in by their savings account holders, or that bank will be nationalized. And again, all private central bank-based systems are pyramids. They will all eventually collapse because by design they create more debt than money with which to pay that debt. The trouble for our times, or the hope for our times, is globalism has linked all these private central banks together, and they're all pulling each other down, and we may soon have a once-in-many-lifetime opportunity, once-in-300-year opportunity, to stand up and say, no more private central banks. The public currency of a nation shall be handled as a public utility. Now, speaking of the IMF, Christine Lagarde has been found guilty of negligence over something she did when she was French finance minister, having to do with refusal to challenge a payout to a business tycoon with whom she was buddy-buddy. And this may be triggering a new leadership crisis at the IMF. And they didn't need to gin this one up out of thin air the way they did her predecessor with this, as it turned out, bogus sexual assault charge. So Christine Lagarde's days as head of the IMF may be coming to an end. Now, you've probably been hearing about, the private retirement and how the government would like to bring that to an end and force you into yet another government-run retirement operation, even though Social Security has turned out to be a complete disaster. Before we get into this, I'm going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're talking about retirement accounts. And so we have to be careful with this story, because we know there has been talk by our desperately broke and hopelessly in debt government about ending private retirement accounts. So we're seeing this story that came out of My Budget 360 saying that the 401k has actually been a disaster for most Americans. Only 44% of private sector workers participate in a defined contribution plan. That part is true. These things tend to be underfunded. But we need to be careful because the government has openly expressed a desire for the 401k and the IRA to go away, and whatever assets are in them will be converted to a special issue treasury bond that you will hold and clutch in the firm belief that somewhere down the road when you retire, that treasury bond will actually be worth something. So you need to be very, very careful. At this point, I don't think any reasonable person should be trusting the government after the way they've mishandled Social Security. Unfortunately, you are required by law to be enslaved to the Social Security system. And Social Security is broke. Back when Bill Clinton was president, he dipped into that trust fund. There was a lot of money back then in Social Security because starting in the 1980s, Social Security taxes had been increased to build up a cash surplus in anticipation of the retirement of the baby boomer generation. That would be me. Well, Bill Clinton came into office and he saw all that money sitting there and he said, well, we're just going to borrow that money and we're going to spend it as general revenue. And that's how I got my federal budget surplus that looked so good and the Democrats are still bragging about. And he got it by looting the American workers. Now, supposedly the economy was doing wonderfully during the Bill Clinton years. And yet he was forced to borrow the money from Social Security to pay the bills and come up with his budget surplus, which was very quickly spent on a bunch of liberal nonsense. And now they can't pay it back. And that's why Social Security is in trouble. And we're constantly hearing two different, you'll pardon the expression, solutions. Either they're going to cut the benefits to all those workers who've paid into Social Security over those years, or they're going to raise Social Security taxes so that you pay for the benefits a second time, neither of which is a good deal. In fact, it's an absolutely raw deal. So, now down in Brazil, as you know, former President Rousseff was ousted because he was trying to basically oppose neoliberalism and basically work for the betterment of Brazil's people and the nation of Brazil. And he was kicked out, Temer was put in, and Temer is now rewarding the bankers and financial investors that backed the coup. He just signed a constitutional amendment imposing 20 years of austerity on the Brazilian people. And you know what austerity means. You must make do with less so the bankers can have more. You must make do with less so the bankers can have more. Neoliberalism is a new politically correct word for fascism, where all the money is concentrated at the top and the ultra-wealthy have a wonderful world for themselves and everybody else lives in squalor and desperation. And they think that's the way it's supposed to be. Now, India is going through serious turmoil in their attempt to be the test bed for the cashless society. Story coming out of Zero Hedge. Gold is now effectively illegal in India. And that was a real shock because India, prior to all this cashless society nonsense, was one of the largest consumers of gold at the personal level. They all love their gold jewelry and their bracelets. You go into any marketplace and there are booths with all the chains and everything on display. That's all now gone away. Now they're hedging and hemming and saying gold for jewelry is still okay, but possession of gold for investment purposes is going to be made illegal. And I predicted this was going to happen. To make the cashless society work, all other portable stores of value and wealth must be made illegal. They have to ban private ownership of gold and silver and what all else. Now, when Roosevelt banned private ownership of gold in the United States back in 1933, they did have an exemption for jewelry because in most cases, people had a strong emotional connection to the jewelry. It was something that belonged to their parents or grandparents, and they wanted to keep it in the family. But ownership of gold and silver privately as a way of storing value was declared illegal in order to make you dependent on the banks for all of your finances. And dependency is slavery. What they're doing in India right now is exactly the same thing King George III tried to do with the American colonies with his Currency Act. You will conduct all your business in these ink and paper notes borrowed at interest from the Bank of England, is what King George III said. That's what sparked the revolution. When the Federal Reserve was created in this country, the public schools stopped teaching about the Currency Act and framed the American Revolution in terms of the Boston Tea Party and impressment of sailors and the Stamp Act. And all of these abuses were tolerable to the colonists. But the taking away of an honest banking system and the idea of choosing with whom they would do business financially, that was the final straw. Now, yet another hedge fund has been caught in massive fraud. This is Platinum Partners, and they were involved in hedge fund operations with oil platforms in the Gulf of Mexico, one of which burned down. And rather than admit they were in trouble and go out of business, they started engaging in little frauds, which led to larger frauds. And basically, hedge fund executives at Platinum Partners have been charged in a $1 billion fraud case. Now, their business will be fined, but they'll go free. Because here in the United States of America, if you're a banker, like a liberal, you're above the law. You're just not to be touched by the laws of mere men. Now, as you know, we're just about a week away here from Christmas. And we're in that final week of shopping and everybody's running around. Actually, I have to be very honest, at least here in Hawaii, the malls have not been crowded the few times I've had to go on down there. There's not much going on at all. And this bodes ill for retailers. And so we're looking at this article that is over at thomasdishaw.com. Sears is on the brink of catastrophe. Store closures loom, and top executives have been leaving the company. They're all turning in their resignations. They can see the writing on the wall. The Limited may shutter their headquarters and close 250 stores permanently. I guess we could call it Retail-mageddon. And it's really very simple to understand what is going on. To have a healthy economy, as the money funnels up to the top of that pyramid, there has to be a recycling mechanism that brings that money back on down to the bottom as decent wages and salaries for working people so that they can pour that money back into the bottom of the pyramid and keep the system going. You can't have a consumer economy with all the money focused at the top. There just aren't that many people. There are not enough of the money junkies to run around to all the shopping malls and buy up all the manufactured goods that keep the retailers going. Fascism deletes that recycling mechanism. And that's what's happened here in the United States of America. The tax burden has been put on ordinary people. The ultra-rich have loopholes and escapes, so they get to hang on to their money, pile it up in the living room, roll around on it. And the system is broken until you get that recycling mechanism going again. To have a healthy economy, money must flow freely at all levels of society and into all necessary levels of economic development. And that is going to be the first task Donald Trump is going to have in repairing this nation's economy, is to deal with that hideous wealth inequality. We may see Sears and other iconic retailers vanish this next year. We're hearing Macy's is in trouble. I don't know about you. I grew up with these names. When I was a kid, there were Sears and Macy's. It was like, they're always going to be here. They're part of the American culture. They're part of the American identity. They could never possibly ever go away. And here we are. Now, turning to immigration, kind of an ugly story. And again, we don't know what the motive is for that truck driving into that Christmas fair in Berlin. Supposedly, they've arrested the driver. We're still waiting to hear any word of a motive. But again, under German law, if it was a refugee talking about how badly the refugees are being treated, we may never hear that. Down in Italy, hospitals are being ordered to kick out patients to make way for the refugees so they can get their free health checkups. And this illustrates a gigantic flaw in the planners of the New World Order, the globalists, George Soros. They're pouring these huge populations into Europe without concern for whether Europe's existing infrastructure can sustain that sudden increase in population. And the answer is it can't. Europe's existing social structures, its infrastructure, its social safety nets are straining under the increased load and are probably going to collapse. And I don't know if it's because everybody is on prescription antidepressants or money junkies just don't think this way. But one of my biggest complaints about the entire U.S. government for the last 20 years is a failure to analyze what they're doing and think about its long-term ramifications and side effects. They just get an idea into their head like, we're going to crush oil prices and that will hurt Russia. And the thinking stops at that point. They move on that, and then all of a sudden they act like they're surprised that Europe's oil industry gets harmed worse, Venezuela's oil industry gets destroyed, fracking can't pencil out, Canada's oil industry is getting hit. They simply don't think about these things, or they don't care. We're going to get Russia, and I don't care if we wreck half the world to do it. It's a small price to pay, and I am willing to make that sacrifice on behalf of you 1.5 billion people whose lives are about to be destroyed. Now, we've been talking about these stinky badges here, and the stories just keep getting worse and worse and worse. Over at the Albuquerque Police Department, which already has a vile reputation, they decided they were going to embark on a program to arrest people for buying crack cocaine. And the easiest way for them to do that is the Albuquerque Police Department set up their own drug lab and made crack cocaine and then offered it on the street for sale. And people who bought it were then arrested. To me, that is clearly a case of entrapment. And certainly everybody in the Albuquerque Police Department involved on this ought to be arrested for running a drug lab and selling crack cocaine on the streets of Albuquerque. But again, we are evolving or devolving into this society where it's okay for these people to do this. It's okay for the police to make crack cocaine. It's okay for the CIA to import that cocaine. Just don't you cut in on our action. Bad things will happen to you if you cut in on our action. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about stinky badges, and this is just so weird. Over in New Jersey, there's a police officer, Jason Miller, and he was arrested back in 2014 because he was caught on video exposing himself to motorists at traffic stops. But because he was a police officer, they gave him a slap on the wrist and they kept him on the police force. And now he's been arrested for sexually assaulting a child in a Burger King bathroom. The first thing that occurs to me when I read this guy on prescription antidepressants. Because the prescription antidepressants, it's not an either-or situation where you take them and you shoot up a shopping mall or you kill yourself or you're perfectly okay. It's a continuum. And one of the hallmarks of these prescription antidepressants is very poor impulse control. You just sort of go with the thought at the moment. You know, well, there's a cute girl in the car I just pulled around. I'm going to show her my nightstick. Or I'm going to grab the kid in the bathroom. And you would have thought after 2014 he would have been a little bit more careful. But there's a big problem with those antidepressants. And I know a lot of people become police officers for the power trip and so forth. But I'm looking at all this bizarre behavior across our entire society. We know that almost all of the mass shootings that the gun grabbers like to wag at us in their attack on the Second Amendment involved people who were either on or withdrawing from prescription antidepressants. And it's when you're withdrawing from them that things can get really, really wild, because everything that was sort of wound up in you gets unwound all at one time. We did a little study here where we took a graph of the per capita increase in domestic violence, and we overlaid it on a sales chart for prescription antidepressants, and they lined up. You know, road rage incidents, bar fights, all kinds of very bizarre behavior. And the poor quality of thinking coming out of Washington, D.C., I'm wondering if in point of fact, we have literally drugged our entire culture into bizarre psychological behavior. And it's not the people, it's the medications. And nobody wants to look at it because it's threatening the profits of those pharmaceutical corporations. And I'll give you another one here that we need to think about. A story that came out of SpectrumNews.org. Prior to 1943, autism was unheard of. It's not an historical disease. We don't find autism being reported back during the medieval period or the Renaissance or anything like that. It was first spotted as literally blooming into existence in 1943 by a gentleman named Leo Kanner, who just in the course of doing his normal work, all of a sudden had 10 of these kids. And they came up with the name autism at that point. As it turns out, 1943 is when thimerosal was first coming into widespread use as a vaccine preservative. It had actually been approved for use in the 1920s. And all of a sudden, it was a vaccine preservative, and all of a sudden, autism starts being a problem. But we can't talk about that. We're threatening the profits of those big pharmaceutical companies. You ought not to do that. Profits are more important than people's health. And besides, if these people are sick, then we make more money off of them. What's wrong with that? It's the broken window analogy. The problem I have with autism, and I've mentioned this before, at the current exponential growth rate of autism, by 2030, half of all children will be diagnosed autistic. That means half of the population will be unavailable to the workforce, and a significant portion of the workforce will be tied up caring for those autistic people. This is a threat to the economy as a whole. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're getting an update from the tragedy up in Berlin where a truck was driven into a street Christmas market. The truck driver has been identified as a Pakistani Sunni Muslim. And we're trying to get more details like name and what his refugee status was. But this is going to end Angela Merkel's attempt to win a new term in office. This is going to absolutely inflame Germany against this refugee nonsense. This could be the spark that literally ignites a German people pushback against this refugee agenda, New World Order, globalist nonsense. Meanwhile, I'm watching on the corporate media, and by and large, the news about the Electoral College is kind of, Trump won the Electoral College. And we're off to fashion show. And it's kind of pleasant and enjoyable to see the corporate media trying to recover from their disastrous predictions of a Hillary Clinton victory and the revelation that they were openly biased in favor of Hillary and were not being honest and objective in their reporting. And again, I have no sympathy for them at all because they did it to themselves by ignoring the basic principles of journalistic integrity, which is why we call them correspondents and prostitutes around here. So, with the Electoral College victory, there is now no path for Hillary Clinton to the White House. If anything happens to Donald Trump from this point on, Mike Pence will be the president. Now, Hillary's already talking about coming back for another try in 2020. Personally, I don't think her health is going to sustain for 4 years, based on what we saw during this last election. And there is a certain pleasure at having blocked Hillary from the White House, ending the narcocracy, considering what an annoyance they've been to me personally over the last 22 years. So I'm going to enjoy the moment. I might even take my Hillary Clinton commemorative toilet bowl brush and give it its first baptism tonight. So there. Now then, let's talk about human-caused global warming. Insert ominous music here. Bitter cold front drives across the plains to Midwest. Average USA temperatures 16 degrees Fahrenheit colder than all of last winter. Not just this date in history, not just this time of year. The average USA temperature is 16 degrees colder than all of last winter. In some places with the wind chill, it is 50 degrees colder than the normal average for this time of year. Boston just broke a 133-year-old record for cold weather. And the warnings are going on out. Be careful on those roads. Be careful of frostbite, hypothermia. This is serious, almost a killing cold. In fact, it is actually colder in Chicago than it is on the planet Mars and Antarctica. Now, snow is covering the ground in Deir ez-Zor, Syria, for the first time in 25 years. Now, down in Tasmania, they've been hit by a surprise snowstorm. And the reason it's a surprise, they're coming up on their summer down there. Now, here's a positive note. Story coming out of Fox 13 now. Ski industry leaders tout record-breaking numbers for the 2015-2016 season. And the numbers are in, and Utah's set an all-time record for skier visits. And they're basically saying for 2015-2016 ski season was a banner year. And they're looking forward to a repeat this year. And that's kind of interesting because back in 2008, and this was reported in Mother Jones, the global warming cult was predicting the end of the ski industry from human-caused global warming. So what's going on here? Well, we've been talking about the Maunder Minimum. We've been talking about the Little Ice Age. We've been talking about the fact that solar output and the Earth's orbit are the dominant factors controlling Earth's climate. The human impact is minuscule. It's demonstrably there, but it's minuscule. Now, part of the problem that we have with all of this is that it's been possible to study the sun scientifically for only about 100 years. I'm talking about beyond sunspot activity, which astronomers have been studying for a very long time with filtered telescopes, which is why the astronomer Maunder noticed this strange absence of sunspots during the same period of time as we got the mini ice age. Now, we already know about the 11-year sunspot cycle, the 22-year magnetic cycle. There are indications of other longer cycles, but we haven't been able to study the sun long enough to know them for sure. But Russian scientists have come up with a new model. Their model is based on the fact that there are, inside the sun, these dynamos in operation. The sun has a very powerful magnetic field. And it's known that the sun, being a ball of gas, it doesn't rotate as a solid body. The equator moves much faster than the areas closer to the poles. So if you were to draw somehow a straight line from pole to pole on the sun, by the next rotation to the sun, the part of the line over the equator would be much further to the east and continue to grow. So it's a fluid mechanism, and because of that fluid motion, there are literally electric dynamos taking place in the sun. What the Russian scientists have discovered, there are two different ones that seem tied into the 11 and 22-year cycles, but they're just slightly off. And they go in and out of phase over long periods of time. And their model basically validates the Maunder minimum. It conforms with that, and they're now basically saying we're entering another mini ice age within the next 15 years. And there's nothing Al Gore can do about it. But they're still out there for your carbon tax money. Remember last week we were reporting, NASA is now out there saying, oops, we were wrong. Carbon dioxide doesn't warm the Earth. Carbon dioxide cools the Earth. And the human, burning fossil fuels is why we're getting all this snow and ice. And again, for anybody who's remembering back in 2000 where they were screaming snowfalls are a thing of the past and burning fossil fuels warms the Earth, and you realize there's not much point in paying any attention to them, especially when NOAA comes out with their recent announcement that the Arctic is showing unprecedented warming. And yes, it's cold down here in the United States and everything, but it's that polar vortex is swapping the Arctic air with the human warmed air from the United States. And they can't really explain how that could happen. And by the way, polar vortex is something that they're trying to use to say, well, this is why the Earth isn't following our predictions. It's something new and unexpected. No, it isn't. There's always been a polar vortex. And one at the South Pole as well. It's called Coriolis effect. It's always been there. They're just trying to wave it at you and say, see, this is why things aren't going the way we said they were going to go. And what we're seeing NOAA do with the Arctic is what Ramses the Great did with Kadesh. Ramses the Great told his people in Egypt that he'd whipped the army in Kadesh, knowing they couldn't actually get up there and check it out for themselves and find out that he'd actually almost lost his army and had to sign a peace treaty. And NOAA's doing the same thing. They've got all their very expensively produced computer graphics and charts and all the rest of this stuff, knowing that ordinary American citizens can't actually go up to the Arctic and take their own measurements. So they're falling back on that. You just take our word for it. We're NOAA. We wouldn't lie to you. We're the U.S. government. We're always truthful with everything here. Now, Scott Adams, who's famous as the creator of Dilbert, which I loved, he's starting to do a lot more political writing, and he's very, very observant. He says one of the problems in dealing with the global warming cult is corporate media will put out stories about human-caused global warming, and then they'll make a mention of the opposite point of view and then dismiss it, saying it's not supported, they're uncooperative, they don't have funding, you shouldn't pay attention. And so people who are not aware of how corporate media manipulates their mind, they'll read the article and come away thinking they know both sides of the debate. And they don't really. And when somebody tries to actually present them something substantive on the opposite point of view, they'll ignore it because they're convinced they already know that it's poorly supported and unsubstantiated and, that everybody who's behind that is working for the oil companies and so forth and so on. But that's how they do it. The world is warming, and yes, these people over here think it's nonsense, but we think they're silly and you shouldn't pay attention to them. And yes, I'm going to an extreme, but in a more subtle form, that's how they do it. And basically, the people who are still going around believing all this liberalologist religion, they're living in an intellectual bubble. And it's why I say that originally, back in the 60s and 70s, the liberals really were the intellectual elite. But since then, anybody who's insecure about their IQ and education, who wants to think they're elite, they become liberal. And it doesn't automatically make them more intelligent. It doesn't make them more educated. It makes them arrogant. And they walk around thinking that they must be intellectual elites because now they're liberals. And in point of fact, what's happening is they're becoming arrogant in their ignorance. And as Scott Adams says, they're not willing to listen to any other arguments because they're convinced they've already heard them, even though all they've heard is a dismissal of them. And this certainly explains a family friend here who was hardcore Hillary and absolutely convinced that Donald Trump had molested all these women, and where they're trying to say these women were outed as having been paid for all this stuff. You could just see the wave off there. I already know all I need to know. And that is definitely a hallmark of the liberalologists. Arrogance of ignorance. I already know what I need to know. If I don't know it, it must not be important, and therefore stop bothering me. And we've seen that time and time again. Now, if you live in Ohio, bad news up there. Ohio has only one national forest, and apparently the U.S. Bureau of Land Management is going to auction off thousands of acres of Ohio's only national forest for fracking. Needless to say, the people of Ohio are very much against this. And the Bureau of Land Management is treating the people of Ohio pretty much the way they treated the Bundys or the folks up at the Wildlife Refuge. We're the BLM. We are above the concerns of ordinary people. We're here to serve corporate interests. We're going to take away your land, your national parks, your national forests, your heritage. We're going to take it and give it to the corporations because that makes money, and money is good, and people are bad. All right, let's talk about computers for a little bit. If you are on Ubuntu Linux, you need to be very careful. Their App Crash Reporter is now found to have a huge security flaw, allowing outsiders to execute code on your Linux box. And you're being warned to patch that code as quickly as possible. Personally, I have a better solution to all the cybercrime. Not the state-sponsored cybercrime, like, the people going after my server, but the ordinary kid in the basement just out to have a little mischief cybercrime. Find just one of those people and crucify them live on a streaming video feed If they're at all reasonably healthy, it'll take them a week to die. And it'll be streaming video, and everybody's going to tune in to see it. Because when was the last time you actually saw somebody actually, really, truly crucified? And I'll bet you 99% of the cybercrime problems are going to go away. And of course, the big question is, where's the NSA in all of this? IBM is estimating 70% of people infected with ransomware wind up having to pay the ransom. Maybe the NSA are the ransomware writers. Maybe ransomware is the virtual online equivalent to civil forfeiture, an excuse to just loot the people by a desperately broke and hopelessly in debt government. Now, a little bit of good news over in Europe. Apparently 34 users who paid for distributed denial of service attacks have been arrested by the police. 101 more questioned. Apparently there are operators who have literally set up entire businesses who, for a fee, will trash a targeted website. This is, of course, illegal, and I don't know why the companies themselves are being left alone, but the people availing themselves of these services are now being arrested. As well they should. As well they should. Whether their goal is censorship of politically inconvenient information or simple commercial advantage. If my competitor's website is down and his customers can't go there, well, then they'll come to me. And there's been a lot of that going on. But again, where is the NSA in all of this? Now, the IRS has come up with a new online system that will allow you, the taxpayer, to look at your outstanding balance and arrange some kind of payments. The IRS is saying they're not sure the system is secure, that it may be open to hacking, but they're going to make it available anyway, because they're more concerned about getting your money than protecting your information. Now, over in the European Union, their cybersecurity policy body, ENISA, has come on out and said the practice of forcing backdoors onto computers and computer equipment is punishing the wrong people. And we know this is true. The real criminals, the real terrorists, are going to have their own encryption. They're not going to be using compromised systems. And all of these backdoors eventually are found by the cyber criminals. That's why it's spreading out of control. The cyber criminals are finding the backdoors, people like NSA force into your computer system, and they use them for their own purposes. The NSA has not made our cyber infrastructure more secure. They've made it weak. It's got more holes than Swiss cheese. Got to take a break. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program today here. And funny story we're getting now, as you know, coming up on the Vikings game, there's a tailgate party. And apparently it is so cold there, minus 20 degrees, with the wind chill minus 34 degrees, they're literally putting the beer on the barbecues just to keep it from freezing. Personally, I think they're silly to be outside in weather like that, but you've got to admire their spirit. It is amazing. Now then, if you're like me, Avatar has to be one of your favorite films. It's my all-time favorite film. I absolutely love it. I got it in Blu-ray. I got it in 3D. It's one of the few 3D movies I bothered to get, and I absolutely love that movie. It's my all-time favorite film. And you probably remember those armored suits that the soldiers would wear and go on out and kill the indigenous people on Pandora. Well, some engineers in South Korea have built one for real. And when you look at the video, they're calling it the Avatar War Robots. 13 feet tall, and they're still R&D'ing it, and they've got a video of it actually walking, and they have another video of the guy sitting in the cab moving his arms around, and the arms move with it. Now, I think it still has a way to go before it's as capable as the one in the movie appeared to be, that all being special effects or computer effects. But it is amazing that they built this thing. Of course, they may be seeking military contracts, and we may have these things in our streets chasing us around in the near future, and that wouldn't be fun. But I do admire the art and skill of it all. We are, as a race, capable of some amazing things if we would just put down these leaders who seek to profit by turning us against each other constantly. Do you realize that most of the world's leaders, ours especially, have the emotional development of a child who likes to knock over anthills just to see the ants scurry around? Because that's certainly what the U.S. government has done in places like Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria and Libya and Yemen. We're just going to go in and drop bombs and, oh, look at how everybody scurries around. Isn't this fun? Now, here in Hawaii, as you know, we're dealing with the light rail construction project. We have been promised by representatives that we ran into at one of the local Christmas events that the construction at street level will all be gone by the end of January. We can hardly wait. It's years behind schedule, billions over, and now it looks like the 27 rail cars that were purchased for this system may have to be scrapped, because apparently the rail cars have a frame of 4 aluminum beams that make up the structure of the cars. And apparently these bars are all defective. And so they're going to have to go back to the manufacturer, and they're going to have to either get these rebuilt or replaced. And it's amazing how badly these things get managed. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and do Jim Goddard's show. We'll be back here tomorrow, Tuesday, on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, congratulations, Donald Trump, our new president. And poor Hillary, we feel so sorry for you. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.